The first light of Oyo 7 rose slow and heavy, spreading its crimson hue across the domes of New Mali. In the quiet between the pulse of the generators and the hum of the wind, Kofi Adeyemi knelt beside his garden. Each plant glowed faintly, silver-blue veins running through their stems like liquid light. He pressed his hand to the soil, feeling the warmth that came from deep underground. It was not just dirt, it was memory. Layers of human hands and alien minerals woven together over centuries. Kofi's garden sat on the outer edge of the colony, where the protective shield shimmered faintly in the morning haze. He liked it there, away from the bustle of the markets and the drone traffic. It was where he could listen, to the soil, to the hum of the air, and to his own thoughts that sometimes grew too loud inside his head. He was halfway through pruning a line of moon petals when he saw her again. The same slender figure he'd noticed for the past 7 mornings. She came at dawn just before the colony stirred. Her movements were careful, almost reverent, as she crossed through the mist. Her skin caught the red light and fractured it like crystal. She was not human. Even from a distance, the way her joints moved, fluid, bending light around them, marked her as one of the Ayla, an alien girl, small and delicate, with eyes that glimmered violet like polished stones. She stepped into his garden without hesitation, knelt among the moon petals and plucked exactly 3. Always 3. Then she placed them in a pouch made of woven light, bowed her head for a heartbeat, and left. Kofi didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from or why she always chose his flowers, but curiosity had started to root itself inside him like a stubborn seed. He'd heard stories of the Ayla before, how they had fought alongside humans during the old wars, how their crystalline bodies could channel energy fields. Some said they had no emotions, others swore they felt too deeply, burning themselves with grief that never faded. Watching her, Kofi didn't see a creature without feeling. He saw someone carrying a weight he couldn't yet name. When she disappeared beyond the ridge, Kofi stood, brushing the soil from his hands. 3 flowers, he murmured. Always 3. He tried to let it go, tried to focus on the plants, on the data logs waiting inside his console. But the image of her lingered. The way she moved with purpose, as if those flowers meant something more than beauty. He wondered where she took them. He wondered who she mourned. Later that morning, Auntie Ama came by, her head wrap glowing with shifting patterns of gold. "You look distracted, boy," she said, peering over his shoulder. "Thinking about your garden again? Or about that girl I keep hearing you muttering about?" Kofi chuckled softly. "You hear too much, Auntie." "I see too much. That's the truth," she said, folding her arms. "Those Ayla folk, strange ways. Maybe she's blessing your plants, or maybe she's stealing your secrets. She only takes flowers," he said. 3 every dawn." Amma laughed, a sound like wind against drums. "Then maybe she's teaching you something. Maybe it's time you asked her why." He smiled but didn't answer. Curiosity had always been his undoing. He'd built a life out of studying what others ignored, alien seeds, hybrid roots, soil memories. Yet something about this felt different. It wasn't science calling to him. It was something quieter, personal. That night, as he recorded his daily notes, Kofi caught his reflection in the data screen. Behind him, the garden shimmered through the glass, alive, breathing. He whispered, "Who are you, flower thief?" He didn't know that by following the answer to that question, he would uncover a story buried in the soil of New Mali itself. A story about loss, remembrance, and the fragile bridge between worlds. And before we go deeper into what he found that morning, make sure you stay with us. This story only grows more extraordinary from here. The sun over Oyo 7 never rose fast. It climbed with patience, dragging heat across the crimson sky until the domes of New Mali shimmered like glass beads. The colony breathed to life with soft vibrations. Market drones humming, children laughing, and the faint rhythm of drums drifting from the lower sectors. Every sound carried the same undertone, survival shaped by pride. Kofi Adeyemi walked through the central market, his sleeves rolled up, the scent of nutrient soil still clinging to him. He greeted people by name, as his father had taught him. Respect was currency here, more valuable than the metals mined from the desert rim. Vendors shouted greetings in a mix of English and Yoruba slang. "Morning, Doc Soil," one woman called, waving a pouch of dried herbs. He smiled, waving back. "Keep that title for the real doctors, Abini. I just make things grow." Abini laughed. "On this planet, that's close enough to saving lives." Kofi's route always led him past the Memorial Plaza, an open space of sand and carved basalt stones. Each stone carried a name etched by hand of those who had died building New Mali. His father's name was there too. Kofi often paused, not long enough to weep, just long enough to remember. His father had been part of the first terraforming corps. They'd turned dead soil into life, mixing alien minerals with earth seeds. When Kofi was a child, his father had told him, "We came from dust, son, but we ain't meant to stay dust. Every root you plant is a promise we made to the stars." Kofi carried those words like a song in his chest. He turned toward the outer district, where the bioluminescent gardens curved along the dome's inner edge. The air there smelled different, wet, living. The colony's filtration towers pulsed faintly, releasing breathable air mixed with floral mist. It was technology fused with tradition, and Kofi took pride in keeping it balanced. As he reached his sector, he saw Auntie Amma waiting outside his gate, her wide hat flickering with digital embroidery. "You late for your own garden, boy," she said. Kofi grinned. "Had to get my soil readings processed downtown." She squinted at him. "You still watching that alien girl?" He sighed. "Auntie, please, you think I don't see her? She walks by my window every dawn like a ghost." "She's not a ghost," Kofi said quietly. "She's careful." Amma tilted her head, curious. "Careful folk don't steal flowers from men they don't know." "She doesn't steal them. She takes them like they matter." Amma gave a small hum. "Everything alive matters, Kofi. Question is to who?" He looked past her toward the ridge beyond the dome. He'd seen the alien girl vanish that way more than once. There were no settlements out there, just red sand, wind towers, and old ruins from before the colony stabilized. Still, she went, always carrying those same 3 flowers. Amma tapped his shoulder. "You think too much. Maybe it's time you ask her name before you start writing poetry about her." He laughed softly. "Maybe." But later, when he worked among his plants, the thought returned. Every leaf he touched, every root he adjusted, seemed to whisper of her. The moon petals she took were not ordinary flowers. They thrived only in balanced ecosystems, their bioluminescent glow tied to soil harmony. If she sought them daily, it meant something was decaying, or someone was gone. As night approached, Kofi stood outside, watching the twin moons rise. The larger one, Adama, reflected the colony domes like a second horizon. The smaller, Ilu, hung low, blood-red. He thought of his ancestors, of migration and the long chain of survival stretching from Earth to this distant world. The Ala girl, whoever she was, felt connected to that chain somehow. Her presence unsettled him not because she was alien, but because she reminded him of something deeply human, mourning that refuses to fade. He looked toward the horizon once more, the place she disappeared each dawn. The ridge glowed faintly in the distance. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd find out where those flowers truly went. And if you think his curiosity ends here, stay close, because what waits beyond that ridge will change everything he believes about life and loss. The next dawn came with a restless wind that carried fine red dust through the cracks of Kofi's gloves. He had barely slept, thoughts looping through his mind like the rhythm of an unfinished drumbeat. The girl would come again, that much he knew. And this time he wouldn't just watch. He stood beside his garden, heart steady but alert, pretending to adjust the nutrient regulators while the mist rolled low across the soil. The colony lights dimmed, letting the natural light of Oyo 7 bleed into the morning. That's when he saw her. She emerged from the haze like a thought made flesh, delicate yet sure. The light caught in her translucent skin, scattering into violet shards. Her steps made no sound, though the soil beneath her shimmered faintly where she passed. Kofi stayed still, watching. Her fingers brushed the petals of a moonbloom, and she paused. It was the same ritual as always, 3 flowers chosen with slow precision. But as she reached for the last one, she froze. Her head tilted slightly as though sensing him. He cleared his throat. "You don't have to sneak," he said quietly. The girl turned toward him, startled but not afraid. Her eyes were unlike anything he'd ever seen, deep violet, glowing faintly from within like light trapped in amethyst. "I'm not sneak," she said, her accent breaking the words softly, musical but uncertain. Kofi took a slow step forward. "You've been coming here every morning. These flowers, they're special. You could have just asked." She tilted her head again, studying him with an expression that hovered between confusion and amusement. "Ask? Humans guard things that grow. You would say no." "Maybe," he admitted, smiling a little. "Or maybe I'd have helped you." The faintest shimmer of curiosity crossed her face. "Help?" He nodded. "I'm a botanist. This garden, it's my work. I grow what this colony needs to breathe and eat. If those flowers matter to you, maybe we can grow more together." She lowered her gaze to the moon petals in her hands. "You grow memory?" Kofi frowned. "Memory?" Her fingers traced the glowing veins of the petals. "These flowers remember light. They grow only where the soil sings. I need them for remembrance." She hesitated, searching for words. "It is for one who is gone." He felt the shift in her tone, the weight that came with grief. "Someone you lost?" he asked softly. Her eyes lifted to meet his again, and in them he saw something ancient, a sadness older than war, gentler than fear. "Mother," she said simply. The word hit him harder than he expected. There was no tremor in her voice, no tears, yet the silence that followed carried all the pain she didn't speak. Kofi nodded slowly. "Then the flowers are yours," he said. "You don't need to hide." She looked at him for a long moment before placing one of the flowers in his hand. "For you," she said. He blinked, confused. "For me?" She nodded. "To remember too. All living keep memory. You forget too easy." Before he could answer, she turned and began to walk away toward the distant ridge. The wind tugged at the loose strands of her crystalline hair, scattering reflections across the soil. "Wait," he called out. "What's your name?" She looked back once. "Arena." Then she was gone, vanishing into the rising light. Kofi stood there for a long while, the flower still glowing faintly in his palm. Its light pulsed like a heartbeat, warm against his skin. He could almost hear it hum, a sound not of sorrow but of remembrance. He looked toward the horizon where she had disappeared, wondering what lay beyond those hills. Whatever it was, the answer had just given him her name, and somehow that felt like the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. And as the dawn brightened over New Mali, Kofi knew one thing. The next time Arena came, he wouldn't just let her leave. The following morning, Kofi woke before the alarms, his mind sharp with a decision he could no longer postpone. The name she had given him, Arena, echoed through his thoughts like the low hum of the energy fields beneath New Mali's soil. He needed to know where she went, what lay beyond that ridge she vanished into each dawn. Curiosity no longer felt like intrusion, it felt like duty. He left his garden in silence, carrying only a small recorder and a pouch of soil samples, just in case he needed an excuse if questioned. The colony domes faded behind him as he followed the faint trail through the dust. The sun's red light pressed against his skin like warm metal. Ahead, the land curved upward, folding into low, barren hills scattered with shards of black stone. He climbed slowly, the ground crunching under his boots. Every few steps he found traces, broken petals glowing faintly, the same moon petals she'd taken from his garden. He knelt to touch one, and it responded to the warmth of his fingers, flaring with soft light before dimming again. It wasn't random, she was marking her path. At the crest of the ridge the wind shifted, the air grew cooler, cleaner. Beyond the slope stretched a small valley, untouched by colony machinery. In the center stood a circle of stones arranged with deliberate symmetry. The ground inside shimmered with threads of bioluminescent script, pulsing slowly alive. Arena was there, kneeling at the center. Her hands rested on the earth, and before her lay the 3 flowers, arranged carefully atop a smooth crystal slab. She wasn't praying, not in any human sense. She was humming a sound low and melodic, almost like the vibration of glass struck gently by a tuning fork. The melody seemed to travel through the air and into the ground, as though the soil itself were listening. Kofi stopped several meters away, unwilling to break the sanctity of that moment. He watched her lips move, words in a language he didn't know but could feel. The hum resonated in his chest, stirring something old and tender. After a long while, she stopped. Without turning, she said, "You followed." He froze, then nodded, though she couldn't see him. "I had to understand." She rose slowly, her translucent hair catching the light. "Humans always say that," she murmured. "Understand. But some things must only be felt." Kofi stepped closer. "This place, what is it?" Her eyes, when she met his gaze, were darker than before, heavy with memory. "Grave," she said softly, "for my mother, for her name." He looked around the circle again. The etchings pulsed gently, synchronized with her breath. "She's buried here?" "Her form, yes. But her light, it moves." Arena placed her palm on one of the glowing stones. "She fought beside humans long ago, when the sky was fire and this world was dying. She gave her life to protect your kind. Yet now few remember her name." Kofi felt the sting of shame ripple through him. His people told stories of the first settlers and the wars they fought, but never of an Allah who had stood with them. "I didn't know," he whispered. She smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "You remember through soil. We remember through sound and light. But forgetting comes to all species sooner or later." He knelt beside her, placing his hand on the earth where the flowers rested. "These blooms," he said, "you take them from my garden because they grow in human soil." She nodded. "They carry both worlds, your dust and mine. That is why they belong here." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the slow rhythm of the wind. "I'd like to help you tend this place," Kofi said finally. Arena studied him, her expression unreadable. "You would share your soil for one who is not your kind?" He met her gaze. "If your mother fought for my people, then her memory belongs to both of us." Her voice softened. "Then you will help keep her light." Kofi didn't yet know how deeply those words would root inside him, but as the morning brightened and the flowers began to glow, he felt the world shift, just slightly, toward something sacred. Kofi returned to the colony before dusk, but the air around him felt heavier, as if he carried the silence of that sacred valley back in his chest. The world went on as usual, markets buzzing, children chasing drones through narrow alleys, but every sound seemed distant, muted under the hum of memory. That night, he sat at his workstation, the light from the data screen reflecting off the small sample of moon-petal dust he'd brought with him. He ran the scans, tracing the bioluminescent patterns, but his mind wasn't on the science. He kept seeing Arena's eyes, hearing the tone in her voice when she said the word mother. The machine beeped softly, displaying the mineral composition of the soil he'd collected from the grave. Human carbon traces. That meant her mother had been buried in ground first cultivated by humans. The realization tightened something inside him. She hadn't just chosen his flowers because they were beautiful. She'd chosen them because her mother's resting place was nourished by the same earth his people brought to life. Kofi turned off the console and leaned back. His father used to tell him stories of the first conflict, the war that almost ended New Mali before it began. The humans had landed on Oyo 7 believing it uninhabited, only to discover the Alar, a crystalline species that saw the planet as a living memory. The war burned across the surface until both sides realized survival required cooperation. But the stories Kofi knew always framed humans as the saviors. He had never heard of an Alar woman who gave her life to protect them. He felt ashamed. How many sacrifices had been buried under layers of retold victory? The next morning, he found Auntie Amma at her usual spot outside the nutrient dispensary. She was grinding seed flour, her bracelets clinking softly. You look like you wrestled a spirit, she said without looking up. Kofi gave a tired smile. Maybe I did. Spirits of regret are the strongest kind. She finally glanced at him. Have you found what you were looking for? He hesitated. Her name was Arena. The flowers are for her mother's grave. Her mother fought for us, for humans. No one remembers her. Amma stopped grinding. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. That's a heavy truth, she said, but truth don't vanish just because folk forget. It waits. He nodded slowly. It shouldn't wait anymore. Amma studied him with knowing eyes. So what will you do, Kofi Adeyemi? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I can't keep tending soil that hides the names of those who bled for it. Amma gave a soft laugh, sad but proud. You sound like your father, always trying to heal things bigger than you. Kofi smiled faintly. He taught me that roots don't care who planted them. They just grow where the earth is kind. She handed him a small woven pouch. Then take this, old seed mix from the first harvest. My husband brought it from Earth. Maybe it's time to grow something that remembers everyone. He accepted it with quiet reverence. Thank you, Auntie. As he walked back toward his garden, he noticed how the colony's structures glowed under the setting suns, glass domes reflecting red and gold, pathways lined with vines that pulsed faintly under the power grids. For the first time, the beauty felt incomplete. He thought of the memorial plaza with its carved basalt stones. Only human names were etched there, hundreds of them. But not hers, not the Allah who gave her life so his father could come home. Kofi stood at the edge of his garden and whispered her name into the wind. Arena's mother. The sound vanished into the rustle of leaves, yet somehow he felt the soil shift beneath his feet, as if the earth itself had heard. That night, he began sketching designs for a new kind of monument. Not of stone, but of living roots, something that would bloom for both species, binding their stories into one breath. He didn't yet know how to make the council see it, but he knew this. The time for silence had ended. And somewhere beyond the ridge, he imagined Arena standing by the grave, feeling the same truth rising through the soil between them. For several days, Kofi couldn't shake the quiet pulse of purpose that now lived inside him. The colony's routines continued, the drone hum, the market calls, the laughter echoing through the corridors. But to him, everything felt sharper, heavier with meaning. He returned to his garden each morning, wondering if Arena would appear again. When she finally did, it was just after sunrise. She approached in silence, her movements measured, eyes reflecting the soft shimmer of the moon petals. Kofi didn't wait this time. Arena, he said, his voice steady. I went to the valley again. Her gaze flickered. You should not go without me. I know, he said, but I had to see it to understand I didn't go to disturb her rest. Arena studied him for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. The soil there remembers. It does not like strangers. Kofi nodded. That's why I want to help. I want to make sure the memory stays alive. He opened his palm to show the small woven pouch Auntie Amma had given him. Inside were earth-born seeds, old, preserved from the first harvest. These carry our beginnings, he said. If we plant them beside your flowers, maybe both kinds of memory can live together. Arena blinked, unsure. You wish to mix our roots? Yes, he said. So we don't forget again. Not your mother. Not the ones who came before. She turned her face toward the rising suns, their twin lights scattering across her crystalline skin. For a while, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice softened. You humans move so fast. You want to heal what you only just began to feel. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but sometimes fast hands plant strong roots. The corner of her mouth lifted, just a hint of amusement. You speak like a poet, not a farmer. I speak like someone who's tired of forgetting, he replied. She crouched, pressing her fingers into the soil. The glow around her hands deepened and the earth responded, vibrating faintly. Our people once shared this ground, she said quietly, before fear pulled us apart. My mother believed that life could bind across form. Perhaps she was right. Kofi knelt beside her. Then let's prove her right again. They worked in silence for a while, mixing handfuls of his dark soil with the pale mineral dust she brought from the hills. When the seeds were planted, Arena drew thin patterns in the dirt, symbols that shimmered with pale light. Kofi recognized some from her mother's grave. They mark the memory? He asked. Yes, she said. Each one a story. Each one a breath of the past. He hesitated before tracing one with his own fingertip. Then let me add ours. She watched as he pressed his hand into the soil, the human warmth dimming her symbols for a heartbeat before they flared brighter than before. The soil accepts you, she whispered. It remembers kindness. Kofi felt a strange stillness settle over him, as if the garden itself had taken a breath. It's not kindness, he said. It's belonging. We've been sharing this planet for centuries, but we've never really shared our stories. Maybe it's time. Arena looked at him then, not with the guarded caution she had before, but with something softer, more open. Your words carry roots, she said. Perhaps we can teach each other how to grow them. He smiled, the morning wind brushing through his short hair. Then teach me. Arena nodded slowly. Tomorrow, she said, at first light. She gathered her pouch, now empty, and turned to leave. Kofi watched her walk toward the horizon again, the dust swirling gently around her feet. The sun was higher now, burning red against the domes of the colony, and he could almost feel his father's voice in the wind. Every root you plant is a promise we made to the stars. He looked down at the freshly mixed soil, at the faint shimmer of symbols fading into the ground, and whispered to himself, "Then this is my promise." He didn't know what would grow from that union of dust and light, but for the first time, it felt like both worlds were breathing together. The colony's main hall smelled faintly of ozone and polished glass. The light filtering through the upper vents painted amber lines across the floor where Kofi stood, hands clasped tightly behind his back. He had presented growth models and environmental reports to the council before, but this time his chest carried something far heavier than numbers. This time he carried the memory of a name nearly lost to history. Mr. Adeyemi, said Councillor Mbeki, her tone clipped and professional. You've requested special allocation of communal land. For what purpose exactly? Kofi took a breath. To create a memorial garden, he said, a living one, a space that honors both humans and Ayla who fought to make New Mali what it is. Their roots, literal and ancestral, should share the same ground. A low murmur spread through the chamber. Mbeki's dark eyes narrowed. You're aware that joint memorials are sensitive. Many families prefer to maintain separation. Cultural preservation, they call it. I understand, Kofi said carefully. But separation also means forgetting. My father used to say the earth doesn't care who bleeds in it. It just remembers. We should remember too. Across the table, Councillor Rudo leaned forward. You've been seen working with one of the Ala, he said. A girl from the outer settlements. Is this project her idea? Kofi's jaw tightened. It's ours. We planted hybrid soil together, human and Ayla minerals. It works. It grows stronger than either alone. That's what this garden should be, a symbol that life is better when shared. Another councillor, old and thin, gave a quiet laugh. You're a scientist, Kofi. You know symbols don't feed people. Your job is to keep the biosphere stable, not to dig up history. Kofi met his gaze. History feeds us too. We just forget to taste it. The silence that followed was sharp. Mbeki folded her hands. You ask us to reopen wounds, many would rather leave closed. The war may be long past, but its ghosts still walk among us. Do you really believe planting flowers will heal that? I don't know if it will heal, Kofi said softly, but it will remind. And maybe that's enough to keep the wounds from rotting deeper. Behind him, the chamber doors slid open quietly. A faint hum filled the air, a tone like glass vibrating. Heads turned as Arena entered, her crystalline form shimmering with quiet defiance. She stepped forward, her accent careful but clear. My mother fought beside humans. Her name was not written. He remembers her. She gestured toward Kofi. You should too. Mbeki's expression shifted, the authority in her voice faltering. This is irregular procedure, Arena interrupted gently. Irregular is when memory dies. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the air seemed to still. Then from the back of the room an older man, a veteran from the terraforming corps, rose slowly. I remember the Ayla woman, he said. She saved my brother's unit when the oxygen fields collapsed. We never knew her name. His eyes turned to Kofi. If this garden keeps her story alive, I'll help. The tension cracked like brittle glass. Whispers turned into quiet nods. Mbeki sighed, weary but moved. The council will deliberate, she said. You'll have our decision by next rotation. Kofi bowed his head respectfully. Thank you. Outside, the sky was shifting toward dusk, streaked with red and gold. Arena followed him out, her movements silent. You spoke truth, she said, even when they did not want to hear. He smiled faintly. Truth's like soil. It gets messy, but something always grows from it. She tilted her head, the faintest glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Then let's hope the roots are strong enough to hold. Kofi looked back at the glowing dome of the council hall. They will be, he said. They have to be. But deep inside, he felt the first whisper of unease. For every seed planted, there were always hands waiting to uproot it, and he knew not everyone in New Mali wanted the past remembered. 2 days passed with no answer from the council. The colony's routines went on, but Kofi felt the stillness before change, the kind that tightened the air before a storm. He spent long hours in the garden, running soil diagnostics, refining growth matrices, anything to quiet his thoughts. Arena hadn't returned since the hearing. Her absence pressed on him like humidity, thick and heavy. The skies above New Mali deepened to a darker shade of red as the atmosphere began to tremble. The weather towers sent warning pulses through the colony's network, an electrical disturbance spreading from the northern hemisphere. Not natural, something born from imbalance. Kofi checked his monitors and froze. The readings from his hybrid soil plots were fluctuating wildly, moisture levels dropping, energy spikes rising. He recalibrated the sensors, but the data stayed erratic. The hybrid flora, the same experimental mix of human and Alar compounds, was reacting to the storm, or causing it. He moved quickly to the central hub and connected his system to the atmospheric feed. The numbers confirmed his fear. The biofields that regulated the colony's oxygen exchange were destabilizing. The storm would soon be more than just wind and dust. It could strip breathable air from the surface. Before he could alert the council, the call came through. Councillor Mbeki's voice filled the channel, cold and sharp. Mr. Adeyemi, we've reviewed your data. The atmospheric anomaly appears linked to your hybrid cultivation. The council is ordering an immediate halt to all experiments. Kofi gripped the console. That's not possible. The hybrid plants stabilize soil. They don't disrupt it. The readings show external interference. Save the excuses, Mbeki interrupted. You've tampered with the biosphere without full authorization. You'll report to Central Command for debriefing. The line went dead. He stood there, pulse hammering in his ears. The storm outside had already begun to lash against the colony dome, the sky flickering with violent bursts of electric light. He looked down at his hands, streaked with soil and sweat, and felt a bitter ache in his chest. They would blame him for this, and maybe they were right to. He had broken protocol, but not like this. Not without understanding what truly caused it. He ran outside. The wind hit him like a living thing, dry and sharp. His garden writhed under the red haze, the hybrid flowers glowing erratically, stems bending as if trying to root deeper into the trembling earth. Lightning arced across the horizon, striking the ridges beyond the colony, the direction of Arena's valley. His stomach clenched. The storm wasn't random. It was moving toward her. He turned to go, but 2 security drones descended from above, blocking his path. Their mechanical voices buzzed. Kofi Adeyemi, cease movement. You are under containment for environmental breach. He raised his hands, shouting above the wind. You don't understand. The storm's hitting the hills. It's where the Alar memorials are. People could die. Containment protocol active, the drones repeated, closing in. Without thinking, Kofi darted sideways, diving through the nearest maintenance hatch. The drones fired stun pulses that scorched the wall beside him, the smell of burnt ozone filling the air. He sprinted through the narrow tunnel, the colony alarms wailing in the distance. By the time he reached the outer gate, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. The air shimmered with static. Every instinct screamed for him to turn back, but the thought of Arena alone in that valley cut through the fear. He opened the gate override manually, the old-fashioned way, his father's way, by tearing out the safety pins and using a grounding rod to bypass the current. Sparks flew as the gate hissed open, and Kofi stepped into the roaring dust beyond. The storm consumed the horizon, a red wall pulsing with light. He pulled his hood tight, the wind tearing at his clothes, and started toward the hills. Each step felt heavier, the gravity of the planet pressing down as if to hold him back. But he kept moving, his mind echoing the same thought again and again. Find her before the storm does. And far in the distance, through the blur of lightning and dust, a faint blue glow flickered, a fragile beacon that might have been her, or might have been too late. The storm roared like a living thing, swallowing sound, light, and thought. Kofi pushed forward through the red rain, each step sinking into trembling soil. The wind howled across the plains, stinging his skin with shards of dust. He could barely see 10 feet ahead, but somewhere in that chaos he felt the pull of the valley, the place where Arena had said her mother's light rested. Lightning split the horizon, flashing against the outlines of broken towers and stone formations. The ground beneath him pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, the same energy patterns he'd seen in Arena's soil symbols. It guided him like a heartbeat through the storm. He followed it until the terrain dropped away and the valley opened below, bathed in shifting crimson light. Then he saw her. Arena was kneeling beside the crystal slab that marked her mother's grave, her form flickering with unstable light. The storm seemed to center around her, currents of energy spiraling outward from where she touched the earth. Kofi shouted her name, but the wind tore the sound away. He stumbled down the slope, his boots sliding on the wet dust. When he reached her, the air around her was electric, humming against his skin. "Arena!" he cried again, dropping to his knees beside her. She turned slowly, her eyes dimmer than he'd ever seen them. "The storm. It answers me," she said weakly. "But it does not know peace." He glanced at the glowing soil beneath them, his hybrid mixture, alive and chaotic. "It's reacting to your energy field," he said, shouting over the wind. "It's amplifying the atmosphere, feeding the storm instead of calming it." Arena shook her head. "I tried to hold it. It won't stop. My mother's memory. It's breaking." Kofi's heart pounded. He looked at the flowers still clutched in her hands, their glow nearly extinguished. "Then we do this together," he said. "You said your people remember through sound and light. I'll give you something human to bind it with." He closed his eyes and began to hum, not a melody of words, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm passed down through generations on Earth, when drums were voices and breath was prayer. The sound was low, steady, pulsing from deep within his chest. Arena looked at him, uncertain, then slowly joined in. Her voice vibrated through the air, crystalline and sharp, weaving through his rhythm like light through smoke. The two sounds met and began to merge, forming something neither human nor alar, but both. The storm answered. The ground shook, the light intensifying. The red rain slowed, drops hanging in the air like glass beads before falling again in slower, softer rhythm. The soil beneath them shifted, the glowing veins aligning into patterns of balance instead of chaos. Kofi pressed his hand to the ground, his pulse syncing with the energy flowing beneath. He could feel the resonance between their bodies and the planet's field, as if the world itself was exhaling. Arena's light steadied, her crystalline form regaining color. She looked at him, tears forming where no liquid should exist. "You carry your ancestors in your voice," she said. "They answer the storm." Kofi smiled faintly, breath ragged. "Guess the old songs still work." A sudden crack of thunder echoed through the valley, followed by silence. The red clouds began to part, revealing streaks of pale gold light filtering from Oyo-7's distant sun. The air cooled, heavy with the scent of wet minerals and soil. Arena sank back, exhausted but alive. "It's quiet," she whispered. "She is quiet now." Kofi nodded, looking up at the fading storm. "You saved her memory," he said. "No," Arena replied softly. "We saved both." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The rhythm of their shared hum still lingered between them, echoing faintly in the wet air, a reminder that life, no matter the form, was bound by sound, by soil, by memory. As the last of the red rain faded, Kofi looked toward the horizon, where the lights of New Mali flickered faintly in the distance. He knew the storm wasn't over, not yet, but for the first time he believed the planet had begun to listen. By the time Kofi and Arena returned to New Mali, the storm had already begun to fade into memory. The skies were still bruised with red, but the air no longer crackled with danger. Instead, it carried a new scent, fresh, earthy, alive. The colony's filtration towers hummed at half capacity, struggling to recalibrate after the atmospheric surge. Yet somehow, oxygen levels were holding steady. That shouldn't have been possible. Kofi walked past the gate guards without a word, mud streaking his clothes, the exhaustion in his steps too visible for anyone to stop him. Inside the dome, people whispered. They'd seen the storm collapse in seconds, lightning unraveling into calm. Some said the planet itself had bent under human will. Others whispered about alien interference. He reached his garden at dawn, half expecting to find it destroyed. But it wasn't. The hybrid flowers stood taller than before, their bioluminescent veins pulsing with steady rhythm. The soil looked darker, richer. It was as if the earth had breathed for the first time in years. Arena stood beside him, silent. Her glow had softened, no longer sharp and fractured. "It listens now," she said quietly. The storm was a cry. Your song answered. Kofi touched the petals of a moonbloom, watching light ripple under his fingertips. "Maybe both our voices did," he said. Together. Behind them, the colony council arrived. Mbeki led the delegation, her expression caught between awe and suspicion. "Mr. Adeyemi," she began, "we received your readings. You claim the hybrid flora stabilized the atmosphere." "They didn't just stabilize it," Kofi replied. "They synchronized it. The soil, the plants, the oxygen towers, they're all part of the same cycle now. The storm was caused by imbalance. When Arena and I joined the energy patterns through vibration, it reset the biosphere." Councillor Rudo frowned. "You're saying the solution to an environmental crisis was singing?" Kofi met his gaze without flinching. "Call it resonance, if you prefer. Every species has a frequency, humans, Alar, even the soil. We just found the harmony." Mbeki's tone softened, though her face stayed guarded. "And you risked your life and the colony to prove it." Kofi looked at the garden. "I didn't risk it. I listened. Maybe it's time we all did." The council members stepped closer, studying the hybrid plants with wary fascination. Their scanners blinked green across the board. No toxins, no anomalies. Only purity. Mbeki exhaled. "This could change everything we know about sustainable growth." "It already has," Kofi said, "but it should change more than science. This isn't just about survival. It's about remembrance. Those flowers, this soil, the very balance we found, it exists because of both our peoples. We can't build the future while erasing the past." Arena turned to the council, her voice calm but firm. "My mother gave her light for your sky. Let this be her voice still speaking." Mbeki hesitated. The silence stretched long enough to make Kofi's pulse quicken. Then slowly she nodded. "You'll have authorization to expand the hybrid program." "Under supervision, of course." Kofi gave a tired but genuine smile. "That's all I ask." As the council left, the hum of the colony deepened. The towers adjusted their frequencies automatically, syncing with the new biosignatures in the soil. The air seemed lighter, clearer. Arena watched the horizon, where the storm clouds were dissolving into faint pink haze. "The planet remembers peace," she said. Kofi nodded. and maybe so do we." They stood in silence as the first full rays of Oyo 7 broke across the domes, bathing New Mali in warm crimson light. The garden glowed brighter, the flowers opening toward the warmth. Arena stepped forward and pressed her hand to the soil. "Two worlds," she whispered. "One breath." Kofi placed his hand beside hers. "One garden," he said. For the first time, the line between alien and human felt like nothing more than a shadow, something fragile that sunlight could erase. But even as peace settled, Kofi knew this was only the beginning. The storm might have passed, but the roots of change had just begun to grow. The following week, New Mali moved differently. The air no longer felt sterile, but carried the scent of living soil and blooming energy. For the first time in years, the filtration towers operated below capacity, the hybrid gardens producing oxygen levels beyond human expectation. Word spread quickly. Kofi Adeyemi's experiment had not only survived but saved the colony. Still, Kofi didn't celebrate. Recognition had never been his pursuit. He spent his mornings kneeling among the flowers, checking root growth, adjusting nutrient balances, and making quiet notes on the energy resonance between the plants and the soil. Yet every pulse of light reminded him of that night in the storm, of Arena's fading glow, of the sound they had made together, the sound that changed the world. The council called for a public assembly at the central plaza. The basalt stones that once carried only human names now gleamed under a layer of translucent glass, the foundation of a new memorial structure. The gathering stretched across the square, a blend of humans and Alar standing side by side. Mbeki addressed the crowd, her voice echoing through the sound channels. "For generations, New Mali has stood as a testament to survival," she began. "But survival means nothing without understanding. Today we honor not only those who built this world, but those who gave their light to sustain it." She turned toward Kofi and Arena. "Engineer Kofi Adeyemi, your work has redefined our relationship with this planet. You've shown us that harmony between life forms is not weakness, it's strength." Applause spread slowly at first, then grew into a rhythmic wave. Kofi felt heat rise in his chest. He stepped forward, unsure if words could hold what he needed to say. "Thank you," he began quietly, then paused, gathering his thoughts. "But this wasn't my doing alone. The soil listened because two voices spoke. One human, one Ayla. The balance we found came from what we shared, not what we built." He looked toward Arena, whose light shimmered softly beside him. Her mother's name was lost for centuries. Without her sacrifice, none of us would breathe this air. It's time we say her name again. Arena's eyes glowed faintly. Kofi gestured for her to step forward. She did, her voice steady, each word clear and resonant. "Her name was Nale," she said. "She was protector, healer, and dreamer. Her light guided your fathers through the darkness. Let it guide you still." The crowd fell silent. Then, one by one, people began to whisper the name, Nale. It spread like a chant, echoing through the plaza, until the entire colony seemed to breathe her memory back into the air. Ariana closed her eyes, and a single tear of crystal traced down her cheek, refracting the light into a prism of colors. Mbeki stepped forward once more. "From this day, her name will stand among ours." She raised her hand and a holographic inscription shimmered across the memorial wall, Na Lai of the Alar, defender of life. The applause that followed wasn't loud or chaotic. It was rhythmic, deliberate, a pulse that matched the heartbeat of the soil beneath their feet. After the ceremony, Kofi and Arena walked back toward the garden in silence. The air glowed faintly, alive with the bioluminescence of countless blossoms. Arena spoke first. "Your people remember now. My mother's light will rest." Kofi smiled softly. "Rest, but not fade. You said memory is energy, right? Then it's moving still, through us, through this soil." She looked at him, her expression somewhere between sorrow and gratitude. "You gave her voice back. You gave me peace." He shook his head. "We gave each other truth." The colony bells rang in the distance, marking the end of the day. As they walked along the path lined with hybrid flowers, Kofi felt a quiet fulfillment settle in his chest. It wasn't pride, nor triumph. It was belonging. He glanced at Arina, her form faintly luminous under the twin moons. "So," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "what do we grow next?" She smiled faintly. "Whatever remembers." And as the wind carried their words through the glowing fields, New Mali seemed to hum back in reply, alive, unified, and awake. The nights in New Mali had grown quieter since the storm. The hum of the towers softened, replaced by the faint rhythm of wind moving through the hybrid gardens. Kofi spent most evenings there now, long after the others had gone home. He would kneel in the soil, hands buried to the wrists, feeling the warmth that pulsed from the ground. It wasn't just temperature, it was something deeper, like the planet breathing. Arina often joined him, though she rarely spoke. Her presence had changed too. The brilliance of her crystalline skin had dimmed slightly, replaced by a calmer, warmer glow. "The garden hums," she said one evening, her voice low. "Can you hear it?" Kofi nodded. "It's alive. But it's not just plants. It's like memory." She tilted her head. "You begin to listen as my people do." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what it takes to be human here now." For a while they sat in silence. The soil between them shimmered faintly with every heartbeat. Kofi had begun to notice patterns in the hum, repetitions that felt almost like rhythm, not random, but purposeful. He'd started recording them, mapping frequency changes. The data made no sense scientifically, yet it echoed his pulse. That night, he ran another scan and frowned. The energy readings aligned perfectly with a waveform he recognized, his own voice from the storm, when he'd sung to calm the planet. The soil had recorded it. It was still replaying the sound, faint but persistent, as if the earth itself had learned the melody. When he told Arina, she listened carefully, then placed her hand on the ground. "The soil remembers through you," she said. "Our songs were never meant to fade. They change shape, take new forms. The planet has learned your rhythm." Kofi exhaled slowly. "So now it carries both of us, human and Allah." "Yes," she said. "That is what my mother dreamed of, a living bridge." Her words settled deep inside him. He thought of his father, of Auntie Amma, of the generations who had tilled alien dust without ever truly knowing it was listening. He thought of Nale, whose sacrifice had been buried under years of silence. Maybe this was how memory survived, not in monuments or stories, but in the ground itself singing quietly beneath their feet. Later that week, Kofi returned alone. The colony was asleep, its domes glowing faintly against the night. The hybrid flowers were open, their light soft and steady. He knelt and pressed both palms to the earth. "Tell me what you remember," he whispered. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, the hum deepened. A vibration moved through the soil and up his arms. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard words, fragmented, distant but unmistakably human. His father's voice, then another, softer, like wind on glass, Nale's. Their tones merged until he couldn't tell them apart. Tears stung his eyes. "I hear you," he murmured. "I hear all of you." The hum subsided slowly, leaving the garden still and bright. Kofi stayed there for a long time, his hands trembling against the earth. He wasn't afraid. He felt more whole than he ever had. When he finally rose, the first light of dawn was breaking. The colony shimmered under the twin suns, the air crisp and clear. Arina stood by the path watching him. "You spoke with them," she said. He nodded. "Not with words, just presence." "It was like they were inside the soil, inside the rhythm." She smiled softly. "That is how the Alar believe life continues, not in spirit above, but in energy below. You have joined that flow now." Kofi looked back at the garden, glowing faintly in the morning light. "Then maybe I finally understand what my father meant," he said quietly. "We came from dust, but we're not meant to stay dust. Every root we plant, every song, every name, it keeps us alive." Arina's gaze lingered on him, You carry many voices now, Kofi Adeyemi. He smiled, tired but content. Then I'll keep listening. And beneath their feet, the soil seemed to hum in agreement. The first festival of roots began under twin suns that burned soft gold over the red plains of New Mali. The colony's domes were opened to the air for the first time in years, letting the living scent of the hybrid gardens drift freely across the settlement. People filled the plaza in colorful attire, woven fabrics patterned after Earth's old nations, mixed with Ilar crystal bands that caught the light like rivers of glass. Kofi stood near the central platform, watching the crowd gather. He had spent weeks preparing for this day, though he still couldn't believe it was real. The idea had started as a conversation with Arena, a small gathering to honor the new soil's balance, and somehow it had grown into a celebration that united the entire colony. The council had supported it reluctantly at first, but the people embraced it. They needed something to believe in after the storm, something that wasn't just survival. They needed meaning. Arena joined him quietly. Her attire shimmered between hues of violet and deep amber, the fabric moving like liquid light. Around her neck hung a pendant of fused soil and crystal, half human, half Ayla. "They came," she said softly, her eyes scanning the plaza. "They did," Kofi replied. "All of them." Children ran between the rows of hybrid flowers lining the plaza's edge, their laughter mixing with the hum of the bioluminescent vines that glowed brighter as the sun rose higher. Musicians warmed up near the stage, tuning drums and stringed instruments modeled after Earth's heritage, but infused with alien resonance technology. The sound that filled the air wasn't purely human or Ayla, it was something new, born from both. When the drums began, the crowd fell into rhythm almost instinctively. The beat echoed through the soil beneath their feet, and Kofi felt it reverberate in his chest. Arena closed her eyes, letting the sound wash through her. "Your people remember through rhythm," she said. "It is the same as our light," he nodded. "It's how we hold on to what matters." The ceremony began with Councillor Mbeki stepping forward to speak. Her voice carried through the plaza, calm and deliberate. "Today we honor not only the unity that saved our world, but the memory that binds us to it. For too long our histories stood apart, human and Aylar, living side by side, but not together. Today we return to the soil that raised us both." As she spoke, a group of children approached the stage, some human, some Aylar, each carrying a small bundle of mixed soil. They poured it into the large vessel at the center of the plaza. As soon as the last handful fell, the vessel glowed, the soil pulsing with light that spread outward in ripples. The ground beneath everyone's feet responded with a faint hum. Arena turned to Kofi. "It remembers the song," she whispered. The musicians shifted rhythm, the drums blending with harmonic tones produced by Alar resonance crystals. Kofi felt the pull of it, the same ancient cadence that had carried through his ancestors on Earth. Without thinking, he began to move. His steps fell into the rhythm, steady and sure. Arena followed, her movements fluid and bright. They danced in circles, their paths weaving like threads in fabric. Around them, others joined, humans and Alar alike, hands meeting, laughter rising. It wasn't planned, but it didn't need to be. The festival became a living memory, a shared heartbeat between worlds. When the music slowed, Kofi looked around and saw faces glowing with warmth. People breathing the same air without barriers, celebrating the same soil beneath their feet. For the first time, New Mali felt whole. Arena leaned closer. "Your father would have danced," she said. Kofi smiled. "So would your mother." The drums faded to silence. In the center of the plaza, the glowing soil pulsed once more before settling into a steady light. The colony's hum felt different now, stronger, calmer. Kofi exhaled, his heart steady. "This is what roots are for," he said, "to hold us in the same earth, no matter where we came from." And as the sun dipped lower over the domes, New Mali glowed, not with technology, but with life remembering itself. After the festival ended, the colony returned to its quiet rhythm, but something in the air had changed. The people moved differently now, slower, gentler, as if afraid to disturb the harmony that had settled into the soil. The bioluminescent gardens stretched farther each day, their glow visible even from the far ridges. Kofi spent his evenings tending to the hybrid roots, pruning and listening to the faint hum that never left the ground. Arena often came at dusk, her light softer now, her presence no longer carrying the sharp edges of grief. She would kneel beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your world is healing," she said one evening. "It remembers joy again." Kofi looked at her, smiling faintly. "It's your world too." She paused before answering. "Perhaps, but my kind do not stay rooted long. We travel between worlds, carrying memory where it's needed. I will leave soon." The words landed heavier than she seemed to intend. Kofi tried to mask the sting of it, but his silence gave him away. "You're leaving New Mali?" Arena nodded slowly. "The Council of my people has called. They have heard what we built here. They wish to learn from it, to carry your harmony to other colonies." He wanted to be proud of that, to feel joy at what they had accomplished, but all he felt was a hollow ache. "You could stay," he said quietly. "There's still more to do. The soil's not finished teaching us." Her gaze met his, steady and kind. "It never will be." "That is why you must stay and I must go." Kofi drew a slow breath. "I suppose even roots need the wind sometimes." She smiled at that, a shimmer of warmth crossing her crystalline face. And wind needs the ground to remember where it has been. They worked in silence for a while, pruning stems, mixing soil. The hybrid blossoms were stronger than ever now, their glow steady and calm. The hum beneath them had shifted tone, lower, slower, like a heartbeat at rest. Kofi realized it wasn't just the planet that was at peace. It was them. When night fell fully, the moons rose side by side, Adama and Ilu casting silver and red light across the garden. Arena stood, looking toward the horizon where the sky met the distant hills. "When I first came here," she said, "I picked flowers to remember loss. Now I will take seeds to remember growth." Kofi rose too, brushing the soil from his hands. "You'll tell them about us? About what we built?" She nodded. "I'll tell them that humanity listens, that your people sing to the ground and make it breathe." He chuckled softly. "You make it sound poetic." "It is," she said. "Poetry is what happens when truth takes root." The words lingered between them unhurried. Kofi wanted to say more, to thank her, to ask her to stay just a little longer, but he understood that this was the way of things. The soil held on, but the sky always called. She reached out, her crystalline fingers brushing against his. The touch was cool, electric, but gentle. "Thank you, Kofi Adeyemi," she said, "for giving my mother's light a home again." He met her gaze. "And thank you for showing me how to listen." A faint wind moved through the garden, carrying petals across the path. Arena turned toward the ridge, her form glowing faintly under the twin moons. "Before the next dawn," she said, "I'll be gone." He nodded, not trusting his voice. As she walked away, the bioluminescent plants brightened, reacting to her presence one last time. The hum beneath the soil shifted slightly, as though the world itself was saying goodbye. When she disappeared over the horizon, Kofi stood alone, listening to the quiet. The garden glowed around him, alive, patient, eternal. He pressed his palm to the earth and whispered, "Then I'll keep it growing for both of us." And somewhere deep beneath the soil, the hum answered him, soft, steady, unbroken. Years passed quietly on New Mali. The hybrid gardens had spread across the colony, turning once barren soil into living mosaics of color and light. What had begun as an experiment was now the heartbeat of the planet itself, roots weaving under domes, blossoms climbing towers, and every breath in the colony carrying the faint sweetness of moon petals. The world no longer felt built, it felt grown. Kofi Adeyemi was older now. His hair had grayed at the temples and the lines around his eyes carried both fatigue and peace. Yet every morning before the suns rose, he still walked to the garden. His hands were slower, but his care was the same, checking soil pH, adjusting irrigation, pruning with gentle precision. The garden had become part of him, and he of it. He no longer expected to see Arena. It had been years since she left, bound for the stars to carry their shared discovery to other worlds. Still, he sometimes imagined her voice in the wind or caught glimmers of her light in the corner of his vision. The memory never hurt. It simply reminded him that growth often meant letting go. Each dawn, he performed a ritual that had become sacred in its simplicity. He picked 3 flowers from the same patch she once tended, moon petals, their glow soft as breath. He carried them up the ridge beyond the colony to the small circle of stones that marked Nale's resting place. The soil there had never stopped humming, alive with resonance. He knelt and laid the flowers gently on the earth. "For your daughter," he whispered, "and for all the roots that found their way home." The hum in the ground deepened for a moment, as if answering him. He smiled faintly, resting his hand on the soil. "She said memory never dies," he murmured. "I believe her now." Behind him, the colony stirred awake. The hum of engines blended with birdsong, the soft mechanical rhythm merging with life's natural pulse. Children's laughter echoed from below, and the air smelled of growth. He stayed there for a long while, speaking softly to the silence, not expecting an answer, but feeling one anyway. Over the years, he had come to understand that memory was not something you carried. It was something that carried you. As the first rays of light broke over the ridge, they struck the flowers, making them shimmer with quiet brilliance. Kofi rose slowly, his knees stiff but steady, and looked out over the valley. The land stretched wide and full of life, fields of hybrid vegetation glowing faintly, water running clear through the old channels, and domes glistening like pearls beneath the suns. "Some roots grow beyond the stars," he said softly. "And maybe some never stop growing." He turned back toward the colony, but before leaving he pressed his hand once more to the ground. "Rest well, Nale," he whispered. "Your light's still here." When he reached his garden, the workers were already there, tending to the plants. They greeted him with warmth, calling him Elder Adeyemi, though he still thought of himself as just a gardener. He moved among them, offering quiet instruction, listening more than he spoke. The hum beneath the soil followed him everywhere he went. As the suns climbed higher, he paused by the central bed, the one he and Arena had built together so many years ago. It was blooming wider than ever, its petals reaching for the light. He leaned down, brushing one with his fingertips. "You'd be proud," he said softly. "They remember." A faint wind moved through the garden, carrying the scent of moon petals and the distant hum of the planet's pulse. For a fleeting moment, he could almost hear a voice, a familiar melodic whisper carried by the breeze. "I never left," it seemed to say. Kofi smiled, eyes closing briefly. The warmth on his skin felt like sunlight, but deeper, alive. He took a slow breath, grounding himself in the moment, in the soil, in everything they had built. And as he returned to his work, the colony above him flourished, the earth beneath him whispered, and somewhere among the stars, a light answered back. If this story moved you, stay with us, because somewhere beyond New Mali, new roots are already waiting to grow.